The air at the Sterling-Rossi wedding tasted of money, old new, and oceans of it. Lilies imported from Dutch glasshouses fought a losing battle against the cloying scent of 1,000 competing perfumes. Isabella Rossi, 7 months pregnant and radiant, in a gown that cost more than a suburban house, felt a single cold drop of sweat trace its way down her spine. Her fiancé, Richard Sterling, the man who was supposed to be waiting for her at the end of the aisle, was missing. And in the pit of her stomach, where their child kicked softly, a primal instinct screamed that this was no simple case of cold feet. She was about to discover a betrayal so profound it would not only shatter her heart, but threaten to bring 2 corporate empires crashing to the ground. The union of Isabella Rossi and Richard Sterling was less a romance and more a coronation. It was the merger of 2 dynasties, a meticulously planned corporate maneuver, wrapped in the fairy tale trappings of a high society wedding. The Rossis, with Isabella at the helm of their marketing division, commanded a global luxury goods empire. Rossi lifestyle, built on Italian craftsmanship and timeless elegance. The Sterlings, a colder, sharper dynasty of American finance, were led by Richard's formidable mother, Victoria Sterling. Their firm, Sterling Holdings, had its tendrils in every corner of the global market. The marriage was the final seal on a multi-billion-dollar merger agreement, a pact that would create a conglomerate of unparalleled power, Sterling Rossi Global. To the outside world, Isabella and Richard were the perfect couple. She was the warm, creative heart. He was the charming, ambitious face of new money. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of paparazzi flashes, charity galas, and weekend trips to Monaco on the Sterling private jet. Richard had courted her with the kind of grand cinematic gestures that left gossip columnists breathless. He'd once filled her Milan apartment with 1,000 white orchids, her favorite simply because she'd had a stressful week. He'd written her name in the sky over the Hamptons. He was attentive, devoted, and seemed utterly captivated by her. But a gilded cage is still a cage. Isabella's brother, Leo Rossi, never trusted him. Leo, 2 years her senior, was the stoic, watchful CEO of the Rossi empire. He had the soul of an old-world craftsman and the mind of a shark. "He performs for you, Bella," he'd told her a month before the wedding, his voice low and serious over a glass of Barolo in his study. "No one is that perfect. He's playing a role, and you need to figure out what his script is." Isabella had dismissed it as brotherly overprotectiveness. "You see everyone as a business opponent, Leo. He loves me, and I love him." Her love was genuine. She saw past the polished Sterling veneer to a man she believed was simply trying to live up to the impossible expectations of his mother. Victoria Sterling was a woman carved from ice and ambition. She viewed emotion as a liability and affection as a currency to be dispensed sparingly and strategically. She approved of Isabella not as a daughter-in-law, but as a priceless asset. The pregnancy, which they had announced 3 months prior, had only increased Isabella's value in Victoria's cold calculus. A male heir would solidify the dynasty. The wedding preparations had been a military-grade operation orchestrated by Victoria. The venue was a historic Long Island estate, its sprawling lawns rolling down to the calm, grey waters of the Sound. The guest list was a who's who of global finance, European aristocracy, and Hollywood royalty. Every detail was curated to scream power. The champagne was vintage, the orchestra was from Vienna, and the 5-tier wedding cake was a confectionery marvel flown in from Paris. The week leading up to the ceremony had been a blur of contractual meetings disguised as family dinners. Lawyers outnumbered cousins. The talk was of stock options, board seats, and brand synergy. Richard, usually so attentive, had become distant, his phone a permanent fixture in his hand. He'd wave away her concerns with a dazzling smile. "Just last-minute merger madness, my love. The price of building our empire. After Saturday, it's just you, me, and the little one. I promise." He had a best man, Marcus Thorne, who was also a senior VP at Sterling Holdings. Marcus was slick and obsequious, always laughing a little too loudly at Richard's jokes, his eyes constantly scanning the room. Isabella found him unnerving. He had a way of looking at her, a flicker of something she couldn't quite name. Resentment, perhaps, or a predatory hunger that was deeply unsettling. She'd mentioned it to Richard once, who had simply laughed it off. "Marcus, he's harmless. A bit of a suck-up, but he's been my right hand for years. Don't you worry your beautiful head about him." On the morning of the wedding, the bride's suite at the estate was a flurry of activity. Her mother, Sophia Rossi, a woman whose warmth was a direct contrast to Victoria's frost, was fussing with the lace on her veil. Her bridesmaids, a giggling trio of her oldest friends from university, were sipping champagne. But Isabella couldn't shake a deep, gnawing anxiety. She hadn't seen Richard that morning. He had stayed at a nearby hotel with Marcus, as per tradition, but he had promised to come to her suite for a private moment before the chaos began, just the two of them. He was an hour late. She'd called him twice. The first time it went straight to voicemail. The second time he'd answered his voice breathless and rushed. "Sorry, darling. Got held up. Marcus needed me for something. A little best man crisis. I'm on my way now. I love you." But there was a noise in the background, a faint feminine giggle. Before she could ask, he'd hung up. "Everything all right, Cara?" her mother asked, her gentle hands stilling on her shoulders. Isabella forced a smile. "Fine, Mama. Just nerves." But it wasn't nerves. It was a splinter of doubt lodged deep in her heart that was beginning to fester. She walked to the grand window of the suite, which overlooked the perfectly manicured gardens where hundreds of guests were already beginning to gather. She saw Victoria Sterling holding court near the grand floral arch, a triumphant queen surveying her kingdom. She saw Leo standing apart, his hands clasped behind his back, his jaw tight as he stared toward the main house. Their child chose that moment to give a strong, decisive kick. Isabella placed a hand on her stomach, a silent promise running through her. "I will protect you, always." The words were a vow, though she did not yet know the war she was about to declare. The drop of sweat completed its journey down her back, and the fairy tale began to curdle. The stage was set, the audience was waiting, but the leading man had gone off script, and Isabella was about to become the director of an entirely different kind of show. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each one taut with an unspoken tension that began to suffocate the joyous atmosphere of the bride's suite. The laughter of her bridesmaids became forced. The bubbles in their champagne seemed to die with a fizz of anxiety. Isabella's phone remained silent on the antique vanity, a sleek black mirror reflecting her perfectly made-up face, a mask of serene beauty that was beginning to crack at the edges. "He'll be here," her friend Jessica said, a little too brightly. "You know what grooms are like. Probably lost his cufflinks or something." But Isabella knew Richard. He was meticulously organized, a trait hammered into him by his mother. He didn't lose things. He didn't run late for appointments of this magnitude, not unless he was distracted. The wedding planner, a severe woman named Ms. Albright with a headset permanently attached to her ear, appeared at the door. "5 minutes, Miss Rossi. Your father is waiting downstairs. The guests are seated." Her eyes darted around the room, noting the absence of the groom. A flicker of professional panic crossed her face before being ruthlessly suppressed. "He was supposed to be here," Isabella said, her voice quiet. "I'm sure he's on his way to the altar." Ms. Albright chirped, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Shall we?" Isabella took a deep breath, the boning of her custom-made gown feeling suddenly like a straitjacket. "I need a moment. Please. Just tell my father 2 more minutes." As soon as the door clicked shut, she looked at her brother's number and pressed call. He answered on the first ring. "Where is he, Leo?" she asked, dispensing with pleasantries. Leo's voice was grim. "I don't know. Marcus is out there by the archway, looking like the cat that swallowed the canary. He told me Richard was composing himself. Victoria is starting to look murderous, and not in her usual way." A new wave of nausea washed over her, this one having nothing to do with her pregnancy. "Leo, he called an hour ago. He said he was with Marcus. I heard a girl laugh." Silence on the other end of the line. When Leo finally spoke, all traces of forced calm were gone. His voice was cold steel. "Where are you, Bella?" "In the suite. They want me to start walking." "Don't move," he commanded. "Don't go anywhere. I'm coming up. Something is wrong." The call ended. Isabella stood frozen in the middle of the opulent room. Her friends watched her, their earlier cheerfulness replaced by a shared silent dread. The scent of lilies was now overwhelming funereal. It was the scent of decay. She had to know. "I need some air," she announced, her voice surprisingly steady. She began walking toward the door, her heavy train whispering behind her. "Bella, wait," her mother cried out. "Your dress, you can't go out there." But Isabella didn't stop. She moved with a purpose that scattered her entourage like birds. She swept past Ms. Albright in the hallway, ignoring her frantic protests. She ignored the confused looks from caterers and staff. Her instincts were a roaring fire in her gut, guiding her steps, pulling her not towards the garden, not towards the ceremony, but in the opposite direction, down a secluded corridor that led to the estate's private wing. The library, the billiards room, and a series of small private studies reserved for the estate's owners. It was a part of the house the guests were not meant to see. The air here was still and cool. The thick carpet absorbed the sound of her footsteps. She passed the grand library, its doors firmly shut. She passed the billiards room. And then she saw it. At the end of the hall, the door to the smallest study, the one with the old mahogany desk and the view of the secluded woods, was slightly ajar. A sliver of light cut across the dark hallway, and from within she heard a sound that would be seared into her memory forever. It wasn't a giggle this time. It was a soft, breathy moan. Her blood ran cold. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Her hand, clutching the bouquet of white peonies and roses, began to tremble violently. The baby inside her was still, as if sensing the impending shockwave. This was a dream, a nightmare. It had to be. In a moment, she would wake up in her bed, and Richard would be there, and this horrible, suffocating feeling would be gone. Then she heard his voice, low and husky, a voice she knew better than her own. "We don't have much time." He said, his words punctuated by another soft, feminine sound. Anger, white hot and volcanic, erupted through the ice of her shock. It propelled her forward. Her trembling stopped. Her hand was steady. She didn't throw the door open. She pushed it slowly, silently. The scene that greeted her was a tableau of obscene betrayal. It wasn't a quick, stolen kiss. It was far, far worse. Her Richard, was there, his perfectly tailored wedding tuxedo jacket thrown carelessly over a chair. His bow tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck, and his shirt was unbuttoned, revealing his chest. He was leaning against the large mahogany desk, and in his arms, her body pressed against his, was a woman. Isabella recognized her instantly. It was Scarlett Dubois, a junior analyst from Sterling Holdings, a pretty brunette with ambitious eyes whom Richard had once dismissed as eager but harmless. Scarlett's dress, a slinky emerald green number completely inappropriate for a morning wedding, was hiked up high on her thighs. Her hands were tangled in Richard's hair. Her lipstick, a garish shade of crimson, was smeared around her mouth. And on the desk, next to a half-empty glass of what looked like whiskey, sat Richard's phone. They hadn't seen her. They were lost in their sordid little world, just meters away from where their families, their friends, their entire world awaited their union. Isabella didn't scream. She didn't cry. A strange, terrifying calm washed over her. It was the calm of the eye of a hurricane, a pocket of absolute stillness before total devastation. She took one step into the room. The heel of her shoe clicked on the hardwood floor just inside the doorway. It was the only sound needed. Richard's head snapped up. His eyes widened first in confusion, then in pure, unadulterated horror. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking pasty and sick. He shoved Scarlett away from him so abruptly that she stumbled backward, nearly falling. "Bella." He choked out his voice, a strangled whisper. It's not what it looks like." It was the oldest, most pathetic cliché in the book, and it was the spark that lit the fuse. Isabella looked from his panicked face to Scarlett's, who was now staring at her with a mixture of fear and defiance. She looked at his undone shirt, at the smeared lipstick, at the jacket, lying discarded like a promise he'd just thrown away. Then her gaze fell to the phone on the desk. She said nothing. She simply turned and walked away. "Bella, wait. Please." Richard's desperate cry followed her down the hall. She heard him scrambling, fumbling to fix his clothes to chase after her. But just as he reached the hallway, another figure appeared, blocking his path. It was Leo. His face was a mask of thunderous rage. He had seen her face as she emerged from the corridor, and he had understood everything in an instant. "You are not taking one more step toward my sister." Leo snarled, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He placed a firm hand on Richard's chest, stopping him cold. Isabella didn't look back. She kept walking her back straight, her head held high. She walked past the confused staff, past Ms. Albright, who was now babbling into her headset. She walked to the grand staircase where her father, a kind man with a gentle face, was waiting for her, his expression a mixture of pride and confusion. "Isabella, what's wrong? Where have you been?" he asked, his voice full of concern. She looked at her father, the man who had always protected her, and for the first time a single tear escaped and traced a path through her perfect makeup. She wiped it away with the back of her hand. "The wedding is off," she said, her voice ringing with a clarity that cut through the air. She didn't wait for his response. She lifted the microphone from the small podium that had been set up for the officiant. Her hand was rock steady. She walked past the stunned string quartet, past the floral arch, and stood before the hundreds of seated guests. The murmuring crowd fell silent, their faces a sea of confusion. They saw a bride impossibly beautiful standing alone at the altar. They expected a tearful announcement of a delay. They expected an apology. They got a revolution. The silence that fell over the garden was absolute. It was a heavy, breathless void, filled only by the distant cry of a seagull and the rustle of leaves in the sea breeze. Hundreds of pairs of eyes were fixed on Isabella, a solitary figure in white against a backdrop of obscene floral abundance. In the front row, Victoria Sterling's face had tightened into a mask of confused displeasure. She started to rise a silent command for Isabella to step down, but a sharp look from Leo, who had now taken a position a few feet to his sister's right, froze her in place. Isabella's knuckles were white where she gripped the microphone. She could feel the baby, a tiny, innocent life, nestled safely inside her. That thought was her anchor. It was her strength. She wasn't just a jilted bride. She was a mother, protecting her child from a legacy of lies before it could even begin. She lifted the microphone to her lips. Her voice, when it came, did not tremble. It was clear, resonant, and carried the cold, hard weight of undeniable truth. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her gaze sweeping across the assembled crowd, deliberately avoiding Richard's family. "I want to thank you all for coming here today to celebrate what was meant to be a joyous occasion." A nervous titter went through the crowd. This was not the expected script. "I have a brief announcement to make," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "There will be no wedding today." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Phones previously tucked away out of politeness began to emerge from pockets and purses. Victoria Sterling was now fully on her feet, her face ashen, her eyes shooting daggers at Isabella. The union between the Rossi and Sterling families, and by extension the merger between our companies, is hereby cancelled, effective immediately. This was no longer a personal drama. It was a corporate bombshell. Murmurs erupted into a low roar. Men in tailored suits began speaking urgently into their phones. The stock market wasn't open on a Saturday, but they knew the bloodbath that would ensue on Monday morning. "Bella, stop this!" Victoria's voice was a sharp, piercing shriek that cut through the noise. "You are hysterical. What is the meaning of this?" Isabella finally turned her eyes to Victoria. There was no fear in her gaze, only a chilling, profound pity. "You should ask your son, Victoria," she said, her voice dropping yet still carrying across the amplified system. "You should ask him what he was doing just a few moments ago in the estate's private study." At that moment, Richard finally appeared at the edge of the garden, skidding to a halt on the manicured grass. He had managed to straighten his clothes, but his face was a wreck of sweat and panic. Marcus Thorne was beside him, whispering frantically in his ear. Scarlett was nowhere to be seen, having evidently made a swift and cowardly exit. "Bella, don't do this," Richard shouted, his voice cracking with desperation as he started to push his way through the stunned guests. "Let's talk about this in private." "In private?" Isabella laughed, a short, sharp, bitter sound that held no humor. "You mean like you and your mistress were just minutes before you were supposed to pledge your life to me, to our child?" The word mistress hung in the air, an accusation so vulgar and direct, it shocked the refined crowd into another stunned silence. The word child was a second blow twisting the knife of betrayal. Everyone knew she was pregnant. The crime was now doubled a sin against both a wife and a mother. Her eyes found Richard in the crowd. He froze, his face a mess of guilt and terror. "I believe the woman's name is Scarlett Dubois," Isabella announced, her voice precise and unforgiving. "She's a junior analyst at Sterling Holdings. For those of you on the board, you might want to review your company's policies on fraternization, especially when it involves the CEO-to-be actively cheating on his pregnant fiancée during his own wedding. Every detail was a nail in the coffin. She wasn't just airing dirty laundry. She was meticulously documenting the crime for the whole world to see. She named the woman, her position, the company, the location, the timing. It was a masterclass in controlled demolition. Richard looked utterly broken, exposed. He looked to his mother for help, but Victoria was staring at him with a look of pure, unadulterated fury. He had not just embarrassed the family. He had single-handedly torpedoed her life's work, the merger in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. He had proven himself to be exactly what she feared most, a weak, foolish boy ruled by his basest impulses. Isabella's gaze softened for a fraction of a second as she looked at her own family. Her father's face was a canvas of shock and dawning rage. Her mother was weeping silently. And Leo? Leo was looking at her with an expression of fierce, absolute pride. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. "I've got you." She turned back to the crowd. "I apologize for wasting your time," she said, her formal tone returning. "But I believe in transparency, and I will not begin a marriage, a family, or a business partnership based on a foundation of such profound disrespect and deceit." She placed the microphone carefully back on the stand. The silence was broken by the sound of her footsteps on the stone path as she walked back the way she came. It was the most powerful walk of her life. She didn't run. She didn't stumble. She moved with the grace and dignity of a queen abdicating a throne she had just discovered was made of filth. As she reached the archway, she unclasped the sterling diamond, the ridiculously large engagement ring Richard had given her. It felt cold and foreign on her finger. She held it out to Leo as he met her. "See that our lawyers get this back to them," she said, her voice a low murmur, "along with a bill for half of this catastrophe." Leo took the ring, his hand closing over it. "Consider it done." "What now?" "Now," Isabella said, taking her brother's arm and not looking back at the chaos erupting behind them. "We go home, and then we go to war." The fairy tale was over. The carefully constructed facade had been shattered into a million pieces. As the Rossi siblings disappeared into the house, leaving the Sterling Empire to implode in a garden of dying lilies, one thing was clear. This was not an ending. It was a beginning. The beginning of a drama that would make the cancelled wedding look like a minor skirmish in a much larger, more brutal conflict. The sleeping giant of the Rossi family had been awakened, and hell hath no fury like a billionaire heiress scorned. The drive from the Long Island estate back to Isabella's Manhattan penthouse was a study in surreal silence. Leo drove the black Maybach with a focused intensity, navigating the traffic as if it were a hostile battleground. Isabella sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the blur of the city, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. The adrenaline of the confrontation had begun to fade, leaving behind a deep, hollow ache that settled in her bones. She wasn't crying. The betrayal felt too vast, too seismic for tears. It was a tectonic shift in the landscape of her life, and she was still surveying the wreckage. Her phone, which she'd left in the bridal suite, had been retrieved by Leo's security detail. When they finally entered the quiet, sun-drenched expanse of her penthouse overlooking Central Park, her head of security, a stoic ex-Mossad agent named Gabriel, handed it to her. "It hasn't stopped, Miss Rosie," he said, his voice impassive. "We've identified 37 unique numbers from the Sterling family and their associates, and over 200 calls from blocked numbers we assume are media. "Turn it off," Leo commanded. "Bella doesn't need to hear from any of them." "No," Isabella said, her voice surprisingly firm. She took the phone. "I want to see the groveling." She powered it on. The device vibrated violently in her hand as a tsunami of notifications flooded the screen. Voicemails, text messages, missed calls. Most were from Richard. She clicked on the most recent voicemail, putting it on speaker. Richard's voice, thick with manufactured tears and genuine panic, filled the room. "Bella. My God. Bella, I am so sorry. You don't understand. It was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. She means nothing to me. It was Marcus. He kept pouring me drinks, saying I was nervous. Scarlett was just there. I don't even know how it happened. Please just talk to me. We can fix this. I love you. I love our baby. Don't throw this all away because of one moment of insanity." Isabella listened with a detached curiosity, as if studying a particularly loathsome insect under a microscope. "He blames Marcus. He blames the alcohol. He calls her meaningless. He hasn't taken one shred of responsibility." She observed, her voice clinical. She deleted the voicemail without a second thought. The next was from Victoria. Her tone was not apologetic. It was furious. "Isabella, you have made a catastrophic error in judgment. Whatever foolishness Richard engaged in it was a private matter. To detonate it publicly, to jeopardize a multi-billion-dollar merger out of pure emotional hysterics, is unforgivable. You have proven yourself to be exactly the kind of liability I feared. Call me back when you have decided to act like an adult and salvage this situation, not for Richard's sake, but for the sake of our shareholders." Leo let out a short, harsh laugh. "She's worried about the shareholders, of course. Her son humiliates you in the worst possible way, and her first thought is the stock price." "It's all she knows," Isabella said, deleting Victoria's message as well. She scrolled through the texts. Pathetic apologies from Richard. Demands from his father. Even a bizarrely threatening message from an unknown number that read, "You just made a very powerful enemy, you little bitch." She suspected it was Marcus Thorne. She tossed the phone onto the marble island in her kitchen. "Lawyers," she said to Leo, "get our legal team on a conference call. I want the merger dissolution papers drafted by Monday. I want a press release from Rossi Lifestyle by noon tomorrow, stating our position clearly. I want our PR team to get ahead of this narrative. I am not the hysterical woman. I am the CEO who uncovered a fatal flaw in a potential partner's leadership and acted decisively to protect my company's interests." Leo was already on his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. "Done. I'm calling Marco, then Julia from Pier. What about the personal side?" "Personal side," Isabella repeated the words as if they were from a foreign language. "There is no personal side anymore. He made it business when he cheated with a company employee. He made it business when he risked our family's name. Victoria made it business when she called me a liability to." The next 48 hours were a blur of calculated strategic warfare. While the Sterlings were in panicked damage control, fielding calls from irate board members and trying to spin a narrative of a troubled emotional bride, the Rossi team launched a surgical PR strike. Their press release was a masterpiece of corporate speak, framing the cancelled wedding and merger as a fundamental divergence in corporate ethics and leadership values discovered at a critical juncture. It never mentioned cheating, but the implication was clear. They were the stable, honorable party, extricating themselves from a toxic partner. The media, smelling blood, went into a frenzy. Paparazzi camped outside Isabella's building and the Sterling Holdings headquarters. Gossip sites published grainy photos of Scarlett Dubois fleeing the wedding venue, her face hidden in shame. Her identity, her job, her social media profiles, everything was dug up and put on public display. She became the digital Scarlet woman torn apart by an anonymous online mob. Isabella felt a flicker of pity for her, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of Scarlett's defiant smirk in that study. Meanwhile, Leo was dismantling the financial ties that had already begun to bind the two companies. He was ruthless. Joint accounts were frozen. Preliminary integration budgets were clawed back. A penalty clause in the initial merger agreement, one Leo himself had insisted upon covering, breaches of good faith and personal conduct by key principals was invoked. It would cost Sterling Holdings hundreds of millions of dollars. Isabella spent most of her time in her penthouse, a gilded fortress against the storm outside. Her mother Sophia had arrived, bringing with her the scent of home-cooked food and unconditional love. She didn't offer advice or judgment. She simply sat with Isabella, held her hand, and let her be silent when she needed silence and rage when she needed to rage. The rage came on the third day. Isabella was standing in the nursery she had so lovingly designed. It was a serene space of soft creams and gentle greys, with a hand-painted mural of a whimsical forest on one wall. A tiny crib stood assembled in the corner. She ran her hand over the smooth wood, and suddenly the full weight of her loss crashed down on her. It wasn't just the loss of a husband, but the loss of a dream of the family she thought she was building for her child. She let out a guttural sob, a sound of pure animal pain. And then she began to dismantle the room. She didn't break anything. Her actions were deliberate, methodical. She folded the tiny clothes and placed them back in their boxes. She took down the mobile of soft, felted stars. She pushed the crib against the wall. She was erasing Richard, erasing the future they were supposed to have, clearing the space for a new one she would have to build alone. Later that evening, Leo came to her apartment. He found her in the now barren nursery, sitting in the rocking chair, staring at the blank space where the crib had been. "The market's open today," he said, softly, leaning against the doorframe. Isabella didn't turn. "How bad was it?" "Worse than we thought." "For them," Leo clarified. Sterling Holdings dropped 17% at the opening bell. The financial press is calling it the Sterling implosion. Our stock, on the other hand, is up 3%. The narrative is holding we're seen as the strong, stable ones who dodged a bullet. A grim satisfaction settled over her. "Good. There's more," Leo said, his tone shifting. "Something's not right. The penalty clause I invoked. Sterling's lawyers are fighting it, which is expected, but their arguments are weak, almost distracted. And I've been looking at some of the preliminary financial data we shared during the due diligence phase. There are anomalies." This caught Isabella's attention. She turned to look at her brother. "What kind of anomalies?" "Small things. Discrepancies in growth projections for certain offshore assets. A few encrypted data packets that our tech team flagged as unusual during the transfer. At the time, we chalked it up to Sterling's sloppy data management. But now, I don't know. It feels different." He walked further into the room. "Think about it, Bella. The affair was stupid. It was arrogant. But the timing, on the morning of the wedding at the venue itself, it's almost too perfect, too self-destructive. Richard is weak and entitled, but is he suicidal? A new thought, cold and sharp, cut through Isabella's grief. Leo was right. The sheer brazen stupidity of Richard's actions was hard to reconcile. It was a level of recklessness that bordered on the theatrical. "What are you suggesting?" she asked. "I'm suggesting," Leo said, his eyes narrowing, "that maybe the affair wasn't the main event. Maybe it was a distraction, a smokescreen designed to cause exactly this kind of chaos. The question is, what was it meant to hide? The world, which had just been shattered, shifted again. Isabella had thought she was at the center of a drama about love and betrayal, but the cold dread creeping into her heart suggested she had been a pawn in an entirely different game. One with stakes that might be far higher than a broken heart and a cancelled wedding. The unraveling, she realized, had only just begun. The seed of doubt Leo had planted grew into a thicket of suspicion in Isabella's mind. For the next 2 weeks, while the world feasted on the scraps of her personal drama, she and her brother initiated a covert operation. They assembled a small, trusted team, Marco, their head of legal, Julia, their PR chief, a forensic accountant named Anya Sharma, who had a reputation for finding needles in digital haystacks, and Gabriel, their head of security, who was tasked with digging into the lives of Richard Marcus Thorne and Scarlett Dubois. Isabella worked from her penthouse, which had been transformed into a war room. The large dining table was covered in laptops, financial reports, and timelines. The grief was still there, a constant, dull ache, but it was now overlaid with a cold, energizing fury. She had been played. Her pain, her humiliation, her child's future, it had all been collateral damage in a game she didn't even know she was playing. Now she wanted to know the rules, and she wanted to burn the whole game board to the ground. Anya Sharma struck first. "The anomalies Leo flagged are real," she announced during a late-night conference call, her voice crisp and excited. "During the due diligence data transfer, Sterling Holdings sent us several large encrypted archive files containing their projections and asset valuations. Standard procedure. But buried within 3 of those archives were ghost protocols, essentially hidden programs that ran in the background while our servers were analyzing the data." "What did the programs do?" Isabella asked, leaning forward, her coffee forgotten. "They didn't steal anything," Anya said. "That would have triggered alarms. They did something much smarter. They made micro-alterations to our own predictive models. Tiny, insignificant changes to algorithm variables that over time would have skewed our valuation of their assets, specifically their new tech and derivatives divisions, making them appear more stable and profitable than they actually were." Leo swore softly in Italian. "So they weren't just showing us fake numbers. They were hacking us to make us believe their fake numbers were our own idea." "Exactly," Anya confirmed. "It's brilliant and terrifyingly subtle. The financial discrepancy would have been a rounding error at first, but post-merger it would have become a black hole. Sterling Rossi Global would have been carrying billions in toxic, overvalued assets from their side of the ledger. Within a year or 2 it would have triggered a catastrophic devaluation." "A corporate Trojan horse," Isabella whispered, the pieces beginning to click into place. "Victoria would never sanction that. She's ruthless, but she's not stupid. A collapse like that would destroy the Sterling name forever." "Which means someone else at Sterling Holdings was running this play." Leo concluded, his voice grim. "Someone who stood to gain from the chaos." The spotlight fell squarely on 2 people, Richard and Marcus Thorne. At the same time, Gabriel's report landed on Isabella's desk. It was a deep dive into the lives of her ex-fiancé and his best man. Richard's profile was predictable, a history of lavish spending, a string of short-term relationships with models and actresses, and a deep-seated psychological need for his mother's approval. But Marcus Thorne's profile was far more interesting. On the surface, he was the loyal number 2. But Gabriel's team had dug deeper. Marcus came from a family that had been rivals with the Sterlings 2 generations ago, before his own family's fortune had collapsed. He had joined Sterling Holdings with a chip on his shoulder, working his way up while living in Richard's shadow. Gabriel had also uncovered a series of encrypted communications and offshore bank transfers. Marcus was living far beyond his declared salary, and the money trail led to a holding company registered in the Cayman Islands. The final piece of the puzzle was Scarlett Dubois. Gabriel's team found that she wasn't just a random ambitious analyst. Her university tuition had been paid for by an anonymous scholarship fund. A fund that Gabriel, through painstaking digital forensics, traced back to the same Cayman Islands holding company that was financing Marcus Thorne. "He's been cultivating her for years," Isabella breathed, staring at the interconnected lines she had drawn on a whiteboard. She was his asset. He placed her inside the company, probably instructed her to get close to Richard, knowing Richard's weakness for a pretty face and a bit of ego stroking. "It's a classic intelligence operation," Gabriel stated. "Thorne is the handler, Dubois is the honey trap." The full horrifying picture began to emerge. This was Marcus Thorne's endgame. He wasn't Richard's friend. He was his nemesis, playing a long, patient game of revenge and ambition. "So here's the play," Leo said, pacing the room, piecing it together. "Marcus plants the Trojan horse in the merger data. He knows it will eventually cripple the new company, but that's not enough. He wants to take over. He needs to discredit the Sterling leadership, namely Richard, and cause a crisis that sends the stock price plummeting." "The affair," Isabella finished, her voice laced with ice. "It was the perfect catalyst. He goads Richard, who is already a willing fool, into a situation he knows Richard can't resist. He makes sure it happens at the most public, most damaging time possible. He wanted me to find them. He wanted the public explosion. It wasn't just about stopping the merger. It was about cratering Sterling Holdings' value." "So he could trigger a hostile takeover," Anya added. "With the stock in freefall, the company would be vulnerable. He and his backers, whoever is behind that Cayman account, could swoop in and buy up a controlling interest for pennies on the dollar. He gets his revenge on the Sterlings. He gets the company, and he gets to be the hero who rescues it from the ashes." Leo summarized, shaking his head in disbelief at the sheer Machiavellian audacity of the plan. It was all there. The cheating scandal wasn't the story. It was the cover. Isabella's public humiliation had been a meticulously planned strategic move in a corporate coup. The realization didn't lessen her pain, but it transformed it. The grief of a victim was replaced by the cold, calculating rage of a queen who had been used as a pawn in a commoner's coup. "Richard," Isabella said the name, testing it. "Where does he fit? Is he a total idiot, or was he a willing participant?" "I think he's a fool, not a conspirator," Leo reasoned. "Marcus likely sold him a different story. Sow some wild oats before you settle down. Have one last fling." He played on Richard's ego and insecurities. Richard thought he was just being a playboy. He had no idea he was the sacrificial lamb. Isabella stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city lights. They seemed sharper now, colder. She had been betrayed on a level she could scarcely comprehend. Her heart had been broken to create a market opportunity. "They underestimated me," she said, softly, her reflection staring back at her from the dark glass. "They all did. Richard thought I was just a prize. Victoria thought I was an asset. And Marcus thought I was a hysterical woman who would just cry and cancel a wedding." She turned back to the room, her eyes burning with a new fire. He's right about one thing. I did cancel the wedding. Now I'm going to cancel his entire future." She looked at Leo, at Anya, at Gabriel. "We have the proof of the financial fraud. We have the connection between Marcus and Scarlett. We have the motive. It's time to stop playing defense. It's time to show them what a Rossi does when you threaten our family and our house." The serpent had played his game, but he had made a fatal error. He had attacked the lioness in her own den, and he had forgotten that she had claws of her own. The war for Sterling Holdings was about to enter a new bloody chapter, and Isabella Rossi, the scorned bride, was about to become its unlikely conqueror. Isabella did not move with the speed of a woman seeking vengeance. She moved with the cold, deliberate precision of a master chess player setting up a checkmate. For a week, she did nothing, letting the public narrative solidify. Sterling Holdings continued its slow-motion collapse. The stock had stabilized but was still down almost 30% from its pre-wedding value. Board members were in open revolt, and Victoria Sterling was fighting a losing battle to maintain control her every move, hampered by the public disgrace of her son. Marcus Thorne, meanwhile, was playing his part perfectly. He was the picture of loyalty, publicly defending the Sterling family, while privately telling key investors and board members that Richard was an unstable liability, and Victoria had lost her touch. He was positioning himself as the only viable successor, the steady hand needed to guide the company through the storm he had created. The first move of Isabella's counterattack was silent and devastating. Through a neutral third-party law firm based in Geneva, Leo, acting on Isabella's instructions, forwarded Anya Sharma's entire forensic report on the Trojan Horse data breach to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Department of Justice. The report was submitted anonymously, flagged as a whistleblower complaint originating from within Sterling Holdings itself. It detailed the attempted fraud, the ghost protocols, and the potential for massive shareholder deception without once mentioning the Rossi family. 2 days later, federal agents walked into the Sterling Holdings headquarters in Midtown with a warrant. They seized servers, computers, and files. The raid made national news, sending a fresh shockwave of panic through the investment community. The stock, which had been limping, now nosedived into a catastrophic freefall. The narrative was no longer about a cheating fiancé. It was about systemic, high-level corporate fraud. Victoria and Richard were blindsided. They had been so focused on the personal scandal that they had no idea a financial guillotine was hanging over their heads. Isabella's second move was targeted at Marcus Thorne himself. While the federal investigation paralyzed the company, Gabriel delivered a dossier to her. It contained irrefutable proof of the offshore account, the payments to Scarlett Dubois, and the crown jewel, a secretly recorded audio file. Gabriel's team had managed to recover a conversation between Marcus and one of his co-conspirators, a disgruntled board member from a cloud backup. In the recording, Marcus laid out his entire plan. The sabotage of the merger, the use of the affair to spook the filly, his disgusting term for Isabella, and his strategy to trigger a hostile takeover using funds from their Cayman Islands entity. Isabella didn't leak the audio. That would be too simple, too chaotic. She decided to deliver the blow herself. She requested a meeting with the Sterling Holdings Board of Directors. The request, coming from the woman at the center of their company's downfall, was met with stunned confusion. But her family was still a major player in the global market, and refusing her would look weak. They agreed, holding the meeting in their cavernous, wood-paneled boardroom, the very heart of the Sterling Empire. Isabella walked into that room, not as a victim, but as a conqueror. She was dressed in a sharply tailored crimson suit, the color of power and blood. She was visibly pregnant, a silent testament to the personal cost of the drama, but her demeanor was pure steel. Leo was by her side, his presence a silent warning. Victoria Richard and the entire board, including a smug-looking Marcus Thorne, were seated around the massive table. Victoria's face was a mask of cold fury. Richard couldn't even look at her. He stared at the table, a broken man. "Thank you for seeing me." Isabella began, her voice calm and clear, filling the tense silence. "I know my presence here is unexpected. I am not here to relitigate the personal events of the past few weeks. I am here to talk about the future of this company." "You have no right to be here," Victoria snapped. "You have done enough damage." "On the contrary," Isabella replied, her eyes locking with Victoria's. "I am here because I am the only person in this room who knows the full truth of why your company is burning to the ground, and it has very little to do with my cancelled wedding." She looked directly at Marcus Thorne, whose smug expression was beginning to falter, replaced by a flicker of alarm. "For weeks you have all been operating under the assumption that this crisis was caused by a personal indiscretion. You are wrong. The affair was merely a tool, a brightly colored flag waved to distract the bull while the matador prepared the killing blow." She nodded to Leo, who placed a small, sleek speaker on the center of the table. "I believe you all know Marcus Thorne," Isabella said, her voice dropping. "You see him as Richard's loyal right hand, the future of this company, perhaps. But I'd like to introduce you to the real Marcus Thorne." She pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the boardroom, arrogant and chillingly clear. "The beauty of it is the simplicity. We let pretty boy Richard hang himself with his own zipper. The girl Scarlett played her part perfectly. The pregnant fiancés, the Philly spooks, just like I said she would. She cancels everything, makes a big dramatic scene. The stock tanks on the personal drama. Then while they're all running around putting out that fire, the feds get the anonymous tip about the merger data. By the time they figure out what's really going on, we've already bought up 30% of the stock from the Caymans. We rescue the company. I take the throne. The Sterlings are history." The silence that followed the recording was heavier than a tombstone. Every eye in the room turned to Marcus Thorne. His face was the color of ash. He half rose from his chair, sputtering, trying to form a denial, but no words came. He was utterly, completely exposed. Victoria Sterling looked as if she had been turned to stone. The betrayal from her son was one thing, but this was a viper she had nurtured in her own nest, a man who had plotted the utter destruction of her life's work, while smiling to her face. Isabella pressed a second button, and an email was sent simultaneously to everyone in the room. "That is the audio file. You will also now have a full dossier detailing Mr. Thorne's offshore accounts, his conspiracy with certain members of this board, and his long-term cultivation of Scarlett Dubois as a corporate espionage asset. I have taken the liberty of forwarding this entire package to the lead investigator at the SEC. I believe they will find it very illuminating." Marcus Thorne sank back into his chair, a dead man walking. His career was over. His freedom was next. Isabella finally allowed her gaze to fall upon Richard. He was staring at her, his eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic plea for a forgiveness he would never receive. He finally understood that he had not been a player, but a pawn. He had lost everything: his fiancée, his child, his company, his family's respect. Not for a passionate mistake, but as a calculated move in someone else's game. It was a truth more damning than any affair. As of this morning, Isabella announced, her voice ringing with finality, Rossi Lifestyle, through a subsidiary investment fund, has acquired a 28% stake in Sterling Holdings, purchased on the open market at its current distressed value. We are now the single largest shareholder. She let that bombshell settle. She owned them. We will be calling for an emergency shareholder meeting to remove the current board and install new leadership. My brother Leo Rossi will act as interim chairman. We will cooperate fully with the federal investigation. We will rebuild this company based on the Rossi values: integrity, transparency, and strength. She stood up. Her point made her victory absolute. She had not just weathered the storm. She had harnessed its power and used it to conquer her enemies. She walked toward the door, pausing only when she was level with Richard. She looked at him, not with hatred, but with a final dismissive indifference. "You were right about one thing, Richard," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It was a meaningless mistake. You are a meaningless man." With that, she turned and walked out of the boardroom, leaving behind the smoldering ruins of the Sterling dynasty. She stepped out into the bright Manhattan sunshine, took a deep breath of the free air, and placed a hand on her stomach. The baby kicked a steady, strong rhythm. It was a new world, a new future. One she had secured not as a bride, but as a warrior. A queen who had faced down betrayal and built an empire from the ashes. And so the fairy tale wedding ended not with a kiss, but with a hostile takeover. Isabella Rossi walked away from the wreckage, not as a heartbroken victim, but as a triumphant queen who had turned the deepest betrayal of her life into her greatest victory. She proved that the strongest empires aren't built on contracts and mergers, but on unbreakable integrity and the fierce, unyielding power of a woman determined to protect her own. Her story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most devastating endings are merely the foundation for glorious new beginnings. What would you have done in Isabella's shoes? Could you find the strength to not only walk away, but to fight back and win? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of resilience, justice, and ultimate empowerment resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for listening. Have you ever wondered how one scandalous leak could destroy an entire empire overnight? Picture this. A stunning millionaire, revered as a philanthropic tycoon, and his radiant pregnant wife, seemingly the perfect power couple. But beneath the glossy photographs and luxurious charity galas, dark secrets simmer. When an explosive video surfaces online, revealing her husband's steamy affair, the pregnant wife doesn't crumble in silence. Instead, she steps into the blinding lights of a press conference, shocking the world and obliterating his career in a single heartbeat. Get ready for a tale of betrayal, resilience, and a downfall so swift it will leave you breathless. Ava Carmichael first met Oliver Carmichael at a fundraiser for the Wilson Children's Hospital in Chicago. Oliver was the guest of honor, a self-made millionaire who had gained national fame after selling his tech startup to Google for a fortune rumored to be in the hundreds of millions. Ava, then a junior event planner, was charged with ensuring the evening ran smoothly. From the moment she locked eyes with him across the packed ballroom, her world shifted. He approached her with a gentle smile and an outstretched hand. Polite conversation turned into an exchange of dreams and life goals. The chemistry between them was electric. Oliver, charming yet aloof, was drawn to Ava's warm-hearted nature and pragmatic approach to life. Their whirlwind romance made headlines in society pages when Oliver took Ava to a private island in the Caribbean. Photos of them strolling barefoot on a secluded beach landed in People magazine, and whispers of an engagement soon surfaced in tabloids. By the time he proposed under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights in front of 1,000 roses, Ava was head over heels. The wedding was a grand affair at the historic Drake Hotel, with the CEO of Morgan Stanley among the guests, and a performance by a famous R&B singer that Oliver secretly flew in. Their union was hailed as a modern fairy tale, the philanthropic tech millionaire and the compassionate event planner uniting their energies to make the world a better place. But in every fairy tale lurks a moment of darkness, and for Ava and Oliver, it was just around the corner. A year after their lavish wedding, Ava discovered she was pregnant. The news filled the Carmichael mansion with excitement. Oliver appeared overjoyed. He'd often spoken of wanting a large family, and Ava was ecstatic to finally be starting that journey with him. They announced the pregnancy during a red carpet charity gala benefiting children with rare diseases. Ava wore a flowing emerald green gown that discreetly showed off a blossoming baby bump. When she and Oliver stepped onto the stage, the entire crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment Oliver placed a tender hand on Ava's stomach. Soon after, local outlets like the Chicago Tribune covered the Carmichael baby buzz, praising Oliver for his ongoing philanthropic endeavors. A short feature on NBC's Today Show hinted that the Carmichaels might become America's new it couple. Ava was flattered, albeit slightly overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Behind the scenes, however, something was off. Oliver had become more distant, engrossed in late-night phone calls and cryptic text messages. When Ava asked about them, he brushed her concerns aside with practiced ease. "It's just business, sweetheart." She tried to believe him. After all, she knew the burden of running a multi-million-dollar conglomerate was enormous. But as her belly grew, so did her suspicions. Faint clues, the lingering trace of unfamiliar perfume on his collar. A second phone he never let her see gnawed at her peace of mind. Still, Ava reassured herself that any man under immense pressure could behave evasively. She clung to hope that once their baby arrived, Oliver would slow down and refocus on their family. Little did she know the cracks forming in their marriage were about to split wide open. With each passing week of her pregnancy, Ava noticed that Oliver's schedule became more erratic. Some nights he would rush through dinner offering half-hearted compliments about her cooking and then dash off to emergency meetings. Other times he'd claim to be traveling for business expansions, leaving Ava alone in their expansive mansion, the echo of her own footsteps, a constant reminder of her isolation. What truly unsettled Ava was the subtle shift in Oliver's demeanor. He was no longer the attentive husband who'd once tracked down her favorite bakery an hour away to bring her freshly baked croissants. Instead, he seemed perpetually preoccupied, scrolling his phone under the dinner table, offering only partial attention to Ava's excited updates about the baby's kicks. In an attempt to distract herself from mounting worries, Ava threw herself into philanthropic work. She organized a fundraiser for hurricane relief, collaborating with real-life crisis manager and PR expert Liz White, a name well known in Chicago's elite circles for orchestrating big fundraising galas. Liz noticed Ava's tense smile and asked if everything was okay at home. Ava merely shrugged it off with a practiced grin. Little did Ava know Liz would soon become more than just a professional acquaintance. Liz's skill in handling scandals and public image crises would be invaluable when the Carmichael family's private pain exploded onto the public stage. For now, Ava remained clueless about the danger simmering beneath the surface. She believed the biggest concern she faced was coaxing Oliver to show up on time for doctor's appointments, but in the hush of her mind, a quiet fear took root. If Oliver was pushing her away, who or what was he pulling closer? Ava never considered herself a snoop. She valued privacy and believed that trust was the bedrock of any strong relationship. But as uncertainty haunted her nights, she found herself unable to resist the urge to peek into Oliver's world. One evening, when Oliver announced yet another urgent meeting and sped off in his car, Ava was left in the large, empty mansion, feeling the baby stir inside her. The sense of foreboding was unbearable. She walked into his home office, a spacious, modern study, lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Her eyes landed on his desktop computer, which glowed with a faint screensaver. With trembling hands, she jiggled the mouse. To her surprise, no password prompt appeared. The desktop opened immediately to an email account. A pang of guilt clutched her, but desperation drove her to click. Most messages were innocuous business correspondences, but a name caught her eye. Miranda Devereaux, a high-profile interior designer from New York. Ava recalled Oliver mentioning Miranda once, someone he was hiring for a new condo project. She clicked on the email thread and found an exchange of flirtatious notes, culminating in a few short video clips. Heart pounding. Ava hesitated before opening them. The first clip showed Oliver at a hotel bar, with Miranda leaning in intimately. The second clip was longer security camera footage from the hotel corridor. It showed Oliver and Miranda entering a suite together late at night, arms wrapped around each other. A wave of nausea overwhelmed Ava, nearly overshadowing the usual pregnancy queasiness. Without a second thought, she pressed forward and sent the emails and clips to herself. She had seen enough, and her world would never be the same again. Oliver returned well past midnight, reeking of expensive cologne. The moment he stepped inside, Ava's tears were already running down her cheeks. She waited for him in the living room. The lights dimmed to a cold glow. Her hands gripped her phone, the forwarded videos ready to play at any second. Ava, he called, visibly startled by her tear-streaked face. "What's wrong?" She didn't bother with niceties. Heart pounding, she pressed play on her phone, letting the damning footage speak for itself. The room filled with the muffled sounds of Oliver's laughter in that hotel corridor, Miranda's figure clinging to his arm. Oliver's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing his usually controlled features. He reached for the phone. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, voice tight. Ava yanked it away, raw hurt radiating in her gaze. "So it's true," she breathed. "You've been cheating on me. With her." At first, Oliver tried to deny it. Words like misunderstanding and business acquaintance tumbled from his mouth. But the evidence was incontrovertible. Finally, he sank onto the sofa, running a hand through his hair. It was just once he muttered, eyes downcast. "A mistake. You have to believe me." Ava's indignation flared. "A mistake. You've been emailing her for months, from what I can see." "Don't lie to me, Oliver. Not now." He bowed his head, too ashamed or too trapped to continue. Furious tears streamed down Ava's face, and she felt the baby kick within her, a cruel reminder of the life she carried, the future she was trying to protect. In that instant, the fairy tale they'd built shattered into pieces, leaving Ava with only heartbreak and betrayal. Ava spent the night in the guest bedroom, barely sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, the images of Oliver with Miranda replayed like a cruel nightmare. By dawn, she felt hollowed out, yet beneath the grief grew a potent anger, she had never experienced before. Before Oliver left for work the next day, she confronted him in the kitchen. She was still in her pajamas, hair disheveled, a world away from the poised socialite she'd become known as in Chicago's charity circuit. "End it," Ava demanded, voice quivering with anger. "Break it off with Miranda for good, and tell the press you're stepping down from the Devereaux project, and you'll be going to marriage counseling with me." Oliver looked at her for a long moment. He seemed more fatigued than she had ever seen him. "I'll end it, Ava," he promised, exhaling sharply. "I don't want to lose our family." The words should have comforted her, but they didn't. The betrayal ran too deep. "I'm pregnant with your child, Oliver. Do you even understand what this stress is doing to me, to our baby?" His silence spoke louder than any defense he could muster. He offered a half-hearted nod before leaving. Ava watched him go, unsure if she had just saved their marriage or delayed its collapse. Though she demanded a swift end to his infidelity, a haunting question nagged at her. Could trust ever be fully repaired once it was broken? Little did she know the storm was only beginning, and a single promise from Oliver would do little to protect them from the catastrophe that awaited. Unable to bear the suffocating loneliness of the mansion, Ava sought solace with her closest friend, Delilah Pierce. They met at a cozy neighborhood cafe, where Delilah arrived with open arms and a wave of concern evident in her eyes. In hushed tones, Ava recounted the entire saga from the suspicious late nights to the damning hotel footage. Delilah listened occasionally, clutching Ava's hand, her coffee growing cold. "I always had a bad feeling about Oliver's constant business trips," she admitted, a note of regret in her voice. "I'm sorry I never brought it up." Ava found some measure of comfort in Delilah's empathy. "I feel so stupid," she said, tears threatening to spill once more. "How could I not see it sooner?" Delilah gave Ava's hand a firm squeeze. "Don't blame yourself. Oliver's the one who made this choice. You're carrying his child. You deserved better." Over the next hour, Delilah offered unwavering support, suggesting therapy resources, and even offering to help Ava prepare for any potential legal issues. "You have to protect yourself, especially with the baby on the way. I know a great lawyer, Samantha Holden, who handled my cousin's messy divorce, just in case." Though the mention of a lawyer made Ava's stomach churn, she recognized the importance of covering all her bases. As they parted ways, Delilah vowed to stand by her side through the ordeal, no matter how ugly it got. Walking back to her car, Ava felt slightly less isolated, but the protective bubble of friendship could only do so much. She would have to face the storm head-on, whether Oliver kept his promise or not. A few days later, the hush of early morning was shattered by Ava's phone, buzzing relentlessly on the bedside table. She groggily picked it up to see dozens of messages and missed calls. Her heart pounded. Could something have happened to Oliver? But as she opened social media, dread coiled in her stomach. A gossip account with thousands of followers had posted a scandalous blind item about a tech mogul with a pregnant wife caught in an affair with a New York socialite. The post included grainy stills from the very hotel footage Ava had discovered, though faces were blurred. Her phone exploded with notifications, friends, acquaintances, even random strangers wanting details. Overwhelmed, Ava felt the baby move as though sensing the turmoil. She quickly turned off her phone, tears stinging her eyes. In a panic, she rushed downstairs to find Oliver. He was in his office phone, pressed to his ear, shouting into the receiver. She overheard him say, "I don't care what it costs, just kill the story," before slamming the phone down. Their gazes locked. Ava's heart sank at the desperation etched across his features. "Someone leaked it," she asked, voice trembling. He nodded grimly. Yes, but we can't be certain who. It might be someone from the hotel staff or someone else. He shot her a look, as if suspecting she had shared the video. Ava bristled, stepping back. Do you really think I'd do that? You promised to end this, Oliver. Now look what's happening. Guilt flashed across his face, replaced almost instantly by defensiveness. We need to put out a statement denying everything. My entire career could be on the line. Ava swallowed hard. She wasn't ready for the media circus, but it was already knocking at their door. Their once private nightmare was about to go very, very public. Oliver scrambled to manage the crisis, summoning his high-profile PR team, led by the formidable Kate Winthrop, a specialist in damage control for celebrity and corporate scandals. Within hours, she arrived at the Carmichael mansion with a flurry of assistants' laptops and a meticulously organized crisis management plan. We're dealing with an unverified leak, Kate said briskly. We have two primary strategies: deny or deflect. If we deny, you risk fueling the rumor mill. If we deflect, we might direct attention elsewhere, but it has to be believable. Oliver paced the room, raking a hand through his hair. What about claiming these images are doctored? That this is just an attempt to undermine my philanthropic work? Kate's expression remained neutral. We can try that, but the pictures look too authentic. And if more footage surfaces, we'll be caught lying. Ava observed the meeting from a corner, her mind swirling. She felt like a spectator at the unveiling of her own heartbreak, reduced to a mere prop in Oliver's PR strategy. As talk of hush money and NDAs swirled, she felt the baby kick a stark reminder that this crisis was not just about reputations, but the future of her family. Eventually, Oliver turned to her. Ava, I need you to stand by my side. We have to present a united front. His words were a bitter pill. She recalled his promise to end the affair. Yet here they were, strategizing about half-truths and misdirection. Ava thought of the unborn child, of the intense scrutiny they would soon face. With shaky resolve, she nodded. She hated the idea of lying to the public, but she also couldn't bear the thought of the scandal smashing their life to bits. She had no idea that the worst was still to come. Even as Oliver's PR team prepared an official statement labeling the footage misleading and maliciously edited, a new crisis brewed behind the scenes. Miranda Devereaux. The woman at the center of the scandal refused to quietly fade away. Instead, she began making demands of her own. One evening, Oliver returned home from an emergency meeting with Miranda's lawyers. Ava watched his strained face as he poured himself a stiff drink. She's threatening to release a full statement, he muttered. Claims she's got text messages, voice memos, everything. She wants compensation, or she'll go public. Ava felt an icy dread settle in her stomach. If Miranda released more evidence, the shallow denials being fed to the media would crumble instantly. So what are you going to do? She asked, voice tight. Oliver's silence was telling. He tossed back his drink before answering. We're negotiating. She wants a huge sum, plus some endorsement deals for her design business. It's extortion, basically. The thought of Oliver paying off Miranda made Ava's skin crawl. And you're seriously considering it? He ran a hand over his face. If it means saving my reputation, yes. You don't understand what's at stake. Our philanthropic work, my investments, people rely on me. If I go down, a lot of people will be hurt. For a split second, Ava wondered if Miranda was truly the villain here. After all, she hadn't vowed to be faithful. Oliver had. The line between right and wrong blurred beneath the weight of scandal, greed, and betrayal. In that moment, Ava realized that Oliver's talk of saving his reputation might overshadow his concern for their marriage or the innocent child they were bringing into a world of lies. Waking up to relentless texts and calls from acquaintances, Ava found her anxiety hitting new heights. Even visits to her OB/GYN became fraught with tension as she feared being recognized and judged. Everywhere she went, it felt like eyes were on her analyzing the scandal. Social media was ablaze with speculation. A few brave tabloids even claimed to have exclusive new evidence pending release. The constant swirl of rumors left Ava hollow and exhausted. Did half of Chicago already assume Oliver was cheating? Did they pity her, or worse, mock her for staying alone in her bedroom? Ava scrolled through her phone, scanning social media. She came across a tweet from Anderson Cooper, a real-life figure known for calling out hypocrisy on his CNN segments, commenting generally about the moral failings of the wealthy and powerful. Although it didn't mention Oliver by name, the timing was suspiciously pointed. She felt a spike of anxiety. Ava found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. How many times had Oliver lied? Was he truly remorseful or just scrambling to hide his tracks? And what if Miranda wasn't the only affair? The seeds of doubt took root, thriving in the soil of shattered trust. One thing became undeniable. If this story escalated further, Oliver's polished facade would collapse. The philanthropic golden boy would be exposed as a fraud, and Ava would be caught in the crossfire. For the sake of her baby, she had to find a way to protect herself, even if it meant going against the man she had once adored. Just as Kate Winthrop and her crisis team finalized a hopefully worded statement for Oliver to deliver, the bomb dropped. Late one evening, a popular YouTube channel called City Secrets Unmasked posted the unedited high-definition version of the hotel footage. This time, the camera angle was clear as day. Oliver's face was unmistakable, laughing, leaning in, whispering to Miranda, before disappearing into a room. Within minutes, the video was trending. National outlets picked it up, and Twitter erupted with the hashtag Carmichael Scandal. Oliver's name soared to the top of search engines, overshadowing even major political news. Ava watched the chaos unfold from the living room television, the baby's weight pressing on her ribs as if in response to her stress. She felt an overwhelming desire to flee to escape the relentless spotlight. But this was her life. There was nowhere to hide from the digital mob. Within hours, the Carmichael mansion was besieged by paparazzi. Some had the audacity to shout questions about her pregnancy, insinuating that the unborn child might not even be Oliver's. Ava gasped at the cruelty. The speculation stung like an open wound. Oliver was unreachable, holed up in his corporate office downtown, bombarded by phone calls from investors and lawyers. Alone. Ava cradled her belly, tears silently rolling down her face. The humiliation was staggering. She wondered, had Oliver realized in his pursuit of forbidden thrills that the collateral damage would be so immense as the scandal spread beyond the local Chicago scene? Ava knew one thing for sure: there was no more denying or deflecting. The world had just gotten a front-row seat to their marital nightmare. Desperate to hear Oliver's side of the story, and furious at his vanishing act, Ava summoned her strength and drove to the headquarters of Carmichael Innovations, located in a sleek, glass-paneled tower in the heart of downtown Chicago. Security guards recognized her instantly and allowed her up, though they exchanged anxious glances. Inside Oliver's office, she found him in a tense meeting with his board of directors. They huddled around a massive mahogany table, glowering at him as if he were a pariah. The room fell silent when Ava walked in her visibly pregnant figure, a jarring reminder of the personal turmoil overshadowing their corporate meltdown. "Gentlemen," Oliver began, attempting composure. "This is my wife, Ava." She faced them chin high, despite the dread curling in her stomach. "Could I speak to my husband alone?" she asked softly, though her eyes burned with determination. Most of the board members exited without protest, some casting disapproving looks at Oliver. Once they were gone, Ava unleashed the questions that had kept her awake at night. "You said you'd end things, but the world has proof that you didn't. How could you lie to me again?" Oliver rubbed his temples, eyes bloodshot from stress. Miranda was supposed to keep it quiet. She swore she wouldn't let it get this far. "I tried to fix it, Ava, I really did." His words only stoked her fury. "All you did was attempt to bury the truth with money," she said, voice trembling. "You've destroyed our marriage, our child's future, everything." They stared at each other across the empty boardroom. For the first time, Oliver's confident mask cracked, revealing a man trapped by his own misdeeds. "What do you want me to do?" he finally asked, voice hollow. Ava couldn't answer. She was no longer sure there was anything left he could do to make this right. In the ensuing days, the corporate fallout grew dire. Prominent investors in Carmichael Innovations withdrew support, worried about the scandal's impact on share prices. Philanthropic partners quietly severed ties, not wishing to be associated with an affair so brazenly exposed. Oliver spent most nights at the office attempting to salvage deals. The mansion felt more like a tomb than a home. Paparazzi still lurked outside the gates, waiting for a glimpse of the troubled couple. Ava found herself pacing the halls, mind whirling with uncertainty. A scheduled charity event for the Wilson Children's Hospital. A cause close to both Oliver and Ava dropped Oliver from the speaker lineup. This move spoke volumes. If even the hospital Oliver once championed was distancing itself, he was rapidly running out of allies. Realizing that her own philanthropic work was now at risk of being overshadowed by scandal. Ava called Liz White, the crisis manager she had worked with months ago. Over coffee in a secluded part of the city, Ava poured out her worries about the baby, the paparazzi, and the unrelenting media scrutiny. Liz listened sympathetically. "You need to start thinking about your own image, Ava, not just Oliver's. Because right now everyone sees you as the victim. But if this keeps spiraling, they might start seeing you as complicit or naive." Ava swallowed hard. She didn't want a war with Oliver, but it was becoming clear she needed to protect herself and her unborn child. She left that meeting with Liz, knowing she had to make some hard decisions, and soon. By now, the Carmichael scandal was headline news across major networks. CNN's Anderson Cooper, having previously hinted at the moral failings of the powerful, dedicated a segment specifically to Oliver's downfall, inviting legal and ethical experts to weigh in. The public response was brutal. Many saw Oliver as the epitome of hypocritical arrogance, preaching philanthropy, while betraying his pregnant wife behind closed doors. At the mansion, Ava tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She kept her prenatal appointments, attempted to rest, and even started decorating the nursery in a soft palette of yellows and greys. Yet every trip out was a gauntlet of flashing cameras and shouted questions. She began dreading the very thought of leaving home. One particular morning, the tension became unbearable. Oliver returned from another fruitless series of investor meetings, shoulders slumped. When he saw Ava packing a suitcase in the master bedroom, a flash of panic ignited in his eyes. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice trembling. "I'm going to stay with Delilah for a while," she replied, zipping the suitcase shut. "I need space. This environment isn't healthy for me or the baby." Oliver opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. Instead, he deflated like a punctured balloon, slumping against the doorway. "Ava, please," he finally managed. "I'm losing everything. I can't lose you too." She looked at him, sadness washing over her. "I wish you'd thought of that before, Miranda. I need time to figure out if there's anything left worth saving." His eyes brimmed with tears, but he said nothing more. Ava dragged her suitcase down the grand staircase, stepping out into the barrage of paparazzi alone, her heart heavy with betrayal and sorrow. It was during Ava's stay at Delilah's cozy brownstone that she received a phone call from a blocked number. Although she usually avoided unknown calls, something compelled her to answer. A soft voice introduced itself. "This is Miranda Devereaux. Please don't hang up." Shock rendered Ava momentarily mute. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Why would Miranda call her directly? She contemplated ending the call, but couldn't resist her curiosity. "What do you want?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Miranda sighed on the other end. "Believe it or not, I never intended for this mess to go public. Someone else got hold of the security footage. I can't say more without jeopardizing my safety, but I wanted you to know it wasn't me who leaked it." Ava's throat tightened. "That doesn't change what happened or how you and Oliver—" She paused, tears threatening. "You ruined my marriage, my life." A moment of silence passed. "I understand you hate me," Miranda said quietly. "But I'm calling because there's something else you should know. Oliver has been hiding more than just our affair. He's in deep trouble legally and financially. I'm sure you've noticed the deals collapsing around him. It's not just because of the scandal, there's a federal probe into his finances. Tax evasion, money laundering, I'm not certain. But it's serious." A swirl of nausea hit Ava. The idea that Oliver's downfall was bigger than an affair blindsided her. "How do you know this?" she finally managed. Miranda hesitated. "Let's just say I overheard some conversations." "Be careful, Ava. If the feds get involved, they won't hesitate to come after anyone close to Oliver, even you." Before Ava could respond, the line clicked off. She stared at her phone, heart racing with a new dread. Oliver's betrayal might pale in comparison to a looming legal catastrophe, and she was now unwittingly entangled in it. Miranda's warning weighed heavily on Ava's mind. She remembered Delilah's earlier recommendation to consult a lawyer. After days of sleepless nights, she mustered the courage to do just that. Through Delilah's referral, she met Samantha Holden, a skilled divorce attorney, known for her tenacity in high-profile cases. They met in Samantha's sleek downtown office, shielded from prying paparazzi. Sitting across from the polished oak desk, Ava felt her cheeks burn with humiliation as she recounted Oliver's affair and Miranda's foreboding message about the feds. Samantha took thorough notes, her brow furrowed. "This is bigger than just infidelity, Ava. If Oliver is facing a federal investigation for financial crimes, you need to protect your interests. If marital funds are implicated, the government could freeze assets." The words froze Ava's blood. "I don't know the first thing about these allegations. I'm pregnant. I just want my baby to be safe." Samantha offered a sympathetic smile. "I understand. My advice is to quietly file for legal separation. That way you create a clear line between your finances and Oliver's. If he's in legal jeopardy, it may protect you and your child from any fallout. And if things get worse, we can move forward with a full divorce." Though the idea of legally distancing herself from Oliver filled Ava with sadness. She knew it might be her only chance at safeguarding her child's future. With trembling hands, she signed an engagement letter, officially hiring Samantha as her attorney. As she left the office, a flurry of mixed emotions assailed her: grief for the marriage she once cherished, anger at Oliver's deceptions, and a glimmer of relief that she was finally taking control of her own fate. In the aftermath of the leaked video, Oliver's reputation took a nosedive. Investors fled in droves, stock prices for Carmichael Innovations tumbled, and philanthropic projects froze. The media was relentless, and yet the public had not heard directly from Ava beyond a few brief sightings and no-comment statements. The tabloids, sniffing blood, began speculating wildly. Was Ava quietly arranging a divorce settlement? Had Oliver threatened her into silence? Some articles even suggested that her pregnancy was a fabricated ruse to garner sympathy. When Liz White, the crisis manager, called to check on Ava, she proposed a bold solution. "Ava, you need to tell your side of the story in your own words. Let the world see you're not just a silent, suffering wife." Ava hesitated. Standing in front of a microphone, addressing a horde of reporters while pregnant, no less, sounded terrifying. But Liz's argument made sense. The rumor mill was devouring her in absentia, and with Oliver refusing to come clean about his affair or financial dealings, it might be time to cut ties publicly. "I'll do it," Ava finally said, surprising even herself with her resolve. "But I'm not lying or covering for Oliver anymore. I'll tell the truth just enough to protect myself and my baby." Liz agreed, her voice brimming with encouragement. "Leave the logistics to me. I'll arrange a controlled press conference, minimal chaos. But be ready. Once you open that door, there's no going back." Ava closed her eyes, feeling the baby move. She understood the gravity of her choice. This wasn't just about clearing her name, it was about reclaiming her identity and ensuring her child wouldn't be born into a vortex of secrets. In the days leading up to the press conference, Ava resided in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She prepared statements with Liz White, conferred with Samantha Holden, and braced herself for the inevitable media frenzy. All the while she heard almost nothing from Oliver. Then on the eve of her scheduled press appearance, she received a late-night phone call. It was Oliver, his voice shaking with desperation. "Ava, please don't do this. Don't go public. It'll ruin any chance I have left to fix things." She steadied herself, fighting back tears. "You've had every opportunity to fix this, Oliver. You chose not to. This press conference isn't about vengeance. It's about protecting myself and our baby." The silence on the other end was palpable. Finally, he spoke, a voice hollow. "I understand you're angry. But you have no idea the legal mess I'm in. A public spectacle will just invite scrutiny. It could land me behind bars." A hollow laugh escaped Ava's lips. "That's not my fault. You did this to yourself." Oliver's next words chilled her. "If you ruin me, you ruin the future of this family. Think about that before you step in front of those cameras." She hung up, breathing heavily, as if she'd just run a marathon. For a moment, doubt tugged at her. She still cared for the father of her child, even after all his betrayals. But the time for illusions was over. Ava swallowed the lump in her throat and reminded herself why she was doing this: to clear her name, to safeguard her baby's future. Oliver had made his bed. Tomorrow, the world would finally hear her side. Morning dawned on Chicago gray clouds gathering in the sky, as if foretelling the tumultuous day ahead. Despite the swirling anxiety in her chest, Ava felt an unexpected sense of calm. She'd chosen a simple but elegant maternity dress in a soft ivory shade, the color symbolizing a fresh start in her mind. Liz White and Samantha Holden met her at the small conference venue, an airy minimalist space rented for the occasion. They'd intentionally avoided the grandiosity of a hotel ballroom, hoping to keep the focus on Ava's message rather than ostentatious surroundings. Security guards milled about outside, ensuring the event remained somewhat contained. Inside, journalists from major outlets like CNN, the Chicago Tribune, and local TV stations fidgeted with microphones. Cameras were poised, ready to broadcast every second. The hush in the room was electric. Ava's heart drummed like thunder in her ears. She kept a hand on her belly, drawing strength from the life growing within. As Liz guided her onto the small stage, Ava spotted a handful of supportive faces in the front row. Delilah, Samantha, and even a hospital representative from Wilson Children's Hospital who had come to show solidarity. Taking a steadying breath, Ava stepped behind the podium. Flashbulbs sparked, and a wave of murmurs filled the room. The tension was thick like a coiled spring on the verge of releasing. It was time to speak her truth, not just about the affair, but about the flawed man behind the philanthropic facade and the toll his secrets had taken on her life. The calm before the storm was over. Ava Carmichael was about to face the world head-on. The conference room fell silent as Ava approached the microphone. For a moment, she simply stood there, letting the bright camera lights and hushed anticipation wash over her. "Good morning," she began, voice trembling slightly. "I'm Ava Carmichael. I'm here to address the rumors and speculation regarding my marriage to Oliver Carmichael." Eyes from every corner of the room locked onto her. Journalists leaned forward, pens poised. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of emotion. Ava's heart pounded like a drum, but she pressed on. She spoke of her pregnancy, how she had longed to start a family in a loving, stable home. She confessed that Oliver's affair was both devastating and humiliating, that she had discovered undeniable proof of his betrayal. She explained that while she once considered standing by him, his continued deception and the possibility of deeper legal entanglements made it impossible for her to remain silent. At one point, a wave of emotion gripped her. Ava paused, tears threatening to cloud her vision. She glanced at Delilah, who offered a reassuring nod. Summoning her courage, Ava continued. "I'm not here for revenge," she clarified, voice growing steadier. "I'm here to protect my child and to separate myself from the lies that have come to light. Any future decisions, including legal ones, will be made with the well-being of my baby in mind." When she finished, the room erupted in questions. Liz stepped in, reminding reporters to keep their inquiries respectful and that Ava's attorney would handle anything pertaining to potential lawsuits. Ava exhaled, her body trembling with relief and nerves. She had done it. She'd laid bare her pain, her intentions, her truth. At that moment, she had no idea how drastically this single press conference would alter the course of Oliver's life and hers. Ava's press conference ricocheted through the media like a lightning strike. Clipped segments ran on national news networks. The full recording went viral on YouTube. Social media platforms erupted with support, condemnation, and endless debate. Hashtags like "Stand with Ava" and "Carmichael Collapse" trended simultaneously. Public perception of Oliver flipped almost overnight. People who once admired him for his charitable work now saw him as a manipulative hypocrite. The sincerity in Ava's statement made it clear she was not seeking revenge, but merely staking her claim to dignity and security for her unborn child. A day after the press conference, CNN's Anderson Cooper weighed in again, praising Ava for her courage and condemning the toxic culture that allowed powerful men to evade accountability. The Chicago Tribune published an op-ed titled "The Strength of Ava Carmichael, Lauding Her Poise Under Pressure." Corporate repercussions were swift. A major investment round that Oliver had been courting fell apart. The few remaining partners in Carmichael Innovations distanced themselves, hastily removing Oliver's name from promotional materials and websites. Even philanthropic boards started voting him out to preserve their reputations. Ava watched the news unfold from Delilah's living room. It felt surreal to witness the magnitude of the fallout she had unleashed by simply speaking her truth. A twinge of guilt gnawed at her. Oliver's downfall was monumental, and part of her still cared about the father of her child. But she couldn't deny the satisfaction of finally freeing herself from complicity in his deception. Little did she realize the next blow in this unraveling saga would come not from tabloid headlines, but from a place with the power to permanently reshape Oliver's destiny, and by extension her own. Just when the media firestorm seemed at its peak, another bombshell dropped. The U.S. Attorney's Office announced a federal investigation into Carmichael Innovations. News broke that Oliver Carmichael was being indicted on charges of tax evasion, wire fraud, and securities fraud. The timing, mere days after Ava's press conference, sent shockwaves through financial circles. Cameras swarmed outside the federal courthouse as Oliver was spotted arriving with his legal team, forced to enter a plea in front of a judge. The humiliating spectacle was broadcast live, capturing every grimace and tense exchange. The very networks that once celebrated Oliver's philanthropic feats now tracked his every misstep. Ava learned of the indictment through a news alert on her phone. Her stomach churned. She sat on Delilah's couch phone in hand and watched the live coverage. Oliver looked haggard shadows under his eyes, the weight of impending consequences etched into his every movement. The charges carried severe penalties, if convicted. Oliver faced the possibility of a long prison sentence. This was beyond mere scandal. It was a life-altering reckoning. Yet the indictments also served as a shield for Ava. With formal charges laid against Oliver, Samantha Holden moved swiftly to bolster Ava's separation case, ensuring none of the allegedly laundered funds were connected to Ava or her unborn child. As the news cameras pivoted from sensational gossip to grave legal analysis, Ava felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Relief that she was extricating herself from Oliver's web of lies, sorrow for the father of her child, and a haunting worry about what kind of future lay ahead for her baby, one with a father potentially behind bars. The day after Oliver's court appearance, Ava woke to a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry." "Oh." She stared at the message for several minutes, waves of sadness rolling through her. His apology was too little too late, like a whisper in a roaring storm. But it was better than silence. Over the next week, Oliver's attempts to contact her became more frequent. Voicemails and texts appeared daily. Ava listened to some tears gathering in her eyes as Oliver's usually confident voice cracked with desperation. He begged for forgiveness, confessed he had been reckless, and claimed to still love her. Yet Ava couldn't forget the nights he'd lied to her face. She couldn't erase the memory of that leaked video or the swirl of scorn she'd endured from the public, and she certainly couldn't ignore the federal charges. Samantha advised her not to respond, at least until the separation process and potential custody arrangements were established. But deep inside, Ava grappled with conflicting emotions. She remembered the Oliver who once left her handwritten love notes every morning, the Oliver who built a children's library wing at the local hospital. Could that man still exist? Or had he always been an illusion? In quiet moments, she would place a hand on her growing belly heart, aching for the child who might never know a father outside prison walls. For all Oliver's sins, Ava couldn't deny that she wished he had chosen a different path, one that might have let them remain a family. Despite the turmoil, Ava discovered she wasn't alone. In the wake of her public statement, letters of support flooded in from women who had faced similar betrayals. Some messages came from single mothers who offered encouragement and practical tips on raising a child independently. The outpouring moved Ava to tears. It gave her a renewed sense of resolve. Philanthropic circles that had once rolled out the red carpet for Oliver now embraced Ava instead. Organizers at the Wilson Children's Hospital invited her to speak at an upcoming fundraiser, praising her authenticity and resilience. Representatives from various women's advocacy groups reached out inviting her to collaborate on initiatives that assisted pregnant women in crisis. Ava felt a flicker of hope. Though her marriage was crumbling, she could funnel her pain into a new purpose, advocating for women caught in relationships eroded by power imbalances and betrayals. Delilah even suggested they start a foundation to provide legal and emotional support to pregnant women facing domestic or financial struggles. Yet with each invitation came the inevitable question: what's next for Oliver's wife? The irony wasn't lost on Ava. She was no longer Oliver's wife in any practical sense, but the world still tied her identity to his. She resolved to carve out her own name and mission separate from his tarnished legacy. In her quieter moments, though, when the well-wishers and supporters had gone home, she still faced the emptiness left by Oliver's absence. Even with the world rallying around her some nights, she felt more alone than ever. A few weeks into Oliver's legal battles, Ava received a call from his attorney. He wanted to arrange a private meeting. No press, no cameras, just Oliver and Ava in a neutral location. The request startled her. A part of her had begun to imagine a future with no direct contact at all. Despite Samantha's caution, Ava agreed, feeling the child shift in her womb, like a gentle reminder that Oliver was still the father. They chose a small law firm's conference room downtown, one with tinted windows that blocked any paparazzi from capturing the encounter. Oliver arrived first. Dressed in a tailored suit, he looked paler, thinner, and burdened by a stress that had etched lines into his face. When Ava entered, they locked eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. The tension was so thick she could barely breathe. Finally, he broke the silence. "I know I've lost your trust, and maybe I'll never regain it. But I wanted to see you to ask about the baby." His voice was hushed, almost reverent. Ava swallowed, placing a protective hand on her belly. "The baby's fine, healthy," she said, her voice hoarse. "I'm due in a few months." Oliver exhaled a shaky breath, a mixture of relief and sorrow. "I made an unforgivable mistake. And now I'm paying for it in ways I never imagined. But if there's any chance at all, I want to be there when our child is born." A swirl of conflicting emotions welled in Ava. She wanted to protect herself, to keep him at arm's length. Yet she couldn't deny the child's need to know its father, assuming he wasn't behind bars. I can't promise anything right now," she replied cautiously. Oliver nodded, understanding that words wouldn't erase the hurt he'd caused. The meeting ended quietly with more questions than answers. As Ava left, she wondered if there was any glimmer of reconciliation, or if it was simply too late for that. Time moved forward, even if Ava felt stuck in emotional quicksand. Weeks turned into months, and her pregnancy edged into its final trimester. Her belly swelled, making everyday tasks more cumbersome, but also filling her with a fierce, protective love for the child growing inside. Oliver's legal battles took center stage in national media. Each court date brought fresh revelations of financial misconduct, fraudulent tax filings, shady shell companies, and possible insider trading. Courtroom sketches of Oliver flooded the news, capturing his anxious eyes and trembling posture. Still, he occasionally sent Ava messages, updates on his case lamentations about losing major assets, even an ultrasound-themed baby blanket he had purchased before the scandal blew up. Ava read and received these gestures with guarded compassion. She was no longer naive enough to believe they fixed anything, but she could see the desperation in his attempts. Meanwhile, Ava's philanthropic work blossomed. She collaborated with Liz White to hold a charity drive for underprivileged pregnant women, collecting baby supplies, prenatal vitamins, and funds for maternal care. The event drew significant media coverage, with many praising Ava for turning personal tragedy into positive impact. Through it all, she grappled with her upcoming childbirth, uncertain whether Oliver would or should be there. The clock was ticking toward a new life entering the world, and she had yet to reconcile the role Oliver would play. As each day passed, the question burned brighter. Could a man so consumed by lies and greed ever become a loving father? Ava's labor came unexpectedly one evening well before her due date. She had been at Delilah's brownstone, finalizing details for another charitable event, when a sharp pain sliced through her. Gasping, she doubled over, her heart pounding in sudden alarm. Delilah rushed her to the nearest hospital, the swirl of city lights casting an eerie glow against the anxious hush of the car ride. By the time they arrived, Ava's contractions had intensified, leaving her breathless and trembling. Nurses whisked her into a maternity suite, hooking her up to monitors. Panicked Delilah contacted Samantha Holden, who in turn thought to call Oliver's attorney. Within an hour, Oliver appeared at the hospital, looking frantic and disheveled. The medical staff recognized his face from the scandalous headlines, but remained professional. Ava, though startled to see him, was too overwhelmed by pun to protest. Time blurred in a dizzying swirl of contractions, medical jargon, and shouted encouragement. Ava was gripped by a primal blend of fear and determination, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. Oliver hovered by her side, tentatively offering a hand. In her pain, she grasped it instinctively. Hours later, after what felt like an eternity, Ava heard the baby's first cry. Relief and awe collided in her chest. The nurse carefully placed a tiny, wriggling infant in Ava's arms. She sobbed, pressing kisses to the baby's delicate forehead. Through tear-blurred vision, she saw Oliver standing nearby, eyes shining with raw emotion. In that instant, their entire scandalous past receded, eclipsed by the fragile miracle of new life. Yet the question lingered. Would this fleeting moment of unity carve a lasting path forward for them? Or would the shadows of betrayal and legal peril snuff it out? Back at the hospital, Ava watched as Oliver gently rocked Amelia, his face softened with awe. For a moment, he looked like the man she once loved before Leeson scandal. He whispered stories to Amelia, promising to change to be present. Ava remained guarded. "This doesn't undo everything," she said quietly. "I know," Oliver replied, eyes on their daughter, "but I want to earn your trust back for her." Later, as discharge papers were signed, Oliver asked if he could come home with them. Ava paused, then shook her head. "Not yet. Amelia and I need time." He nodded visibly, crushed but respectful. "Thank you for letting me be here." As she cradled Amelia and stepped into the waiting car, Ava felt both the weight of the past and the hope of a future. trust was fragile, but for her daughter's sake she was willing to leave the door cracked just enough. In the weeks after Amelia's birth, Ava embraced motherhood in quiet refuge, away from media glare. Oliver, facing trial, visited often gentle with Amelia, sincere in his efforts. Ava remained cautious, but let him in a little at a time. Then came his sentencing. Found guilty of tax evasion and securities fraud, Oliver received 5 years in federal prison. Outside the courthouse, tears slipped down his face as he told Ava, "I'll serve my time. I hope there's still a chance for Amelia, and maybe for us." Ava, holding Amelia close, replied softly, "We'll see. One day at a time." As Oliver was led away, Ava stood beneath the Chicago sky, her daughter nestled in her arms. The fairy tale had crumbled, but something more honest remained a second chance. Not for romance, but for truth, for healing, and for a life finally free of secrets. She was ready to build that future, one step at a time. Ava Carmichael's life changed the moment the leaked footage of her husband's affair hit the internet. But it was the power of her own voice at that pivotal press conference that truly redefined her destiny. While Oliver's empire crumbled under the weight of his transgressions and legal battles, Ava emerged stronger, driven by her love for her newborn daughter and a determination to carve out a future rooted in truth. Ultimately, hers is a story of resilience, triumphing over betrayal of motherhood, guiding the path to self-discovery. Ava transformed from a silent figure, overshadowed by her husband's fortune, into a public advocate for women facing emotional, financial, and marital turmoil. Though Oliver's journey led him to a prison cell, Ava found the courage to stand on her own, proving that even the darkest revelations can pave the way for newfound purpose. If you found meaning or inspiration in Ava's journey, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support empowers us to uncover more stories that shine a light on the power of truth and resilience. Together, let's continue inspiring and uplifting one another, one extraordinary tale at a time.